Since the start of this year, a plethora of major projects throughout China have been under construction, with a significant amount of investment. In the last few years, China has completed numerous mega infrastructure projects, so China is also widely known as an infrastructure maniac. Many aggressive infrastructural investment policies have been implemented by levels of governments each year. In 2022, with the support of the central government's policies, even more ambitious investment plans for such projects have been launched one after another, leading mainstream media to call 2022 the year of infrastructure construction. As of February 6, 8 provinces, including Shandong, Beijing, and Shanghai, have all released their lists of major infrastructure projects for 2022. In total, 6,501 projects have been confirmed, with a total investment of over $2.46 trillion. As is the case with many countries, China's GDP is heavily driven by private consumption, exports, and investments. According to figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics, China's annual GDP grew by 8.1% in 2021, with a 2-year average growth rate of 5.1%. These figures also show that private consumption accounts for around 65% of GDP growth, while exports contribute 21% and investments account for 14% of growth. That being said, China's consumption growth continues to slow since 2021 and has since been starting to drag down China's economic growth. In the last 2 years, the growth of total retail sales of consumer goods was only around 4%, lower than the earlier growth rates of 5.1%. In addition, with the restructuring of the international supply chain and the withdrawal of numerous foreign companies from China, paired with the shortage of raw materials and crucial components like wafers, China's foreign trade industry will also be facing many uncertainties and difficulties in 2022. In this problematic situation, the Chinese government thus hopes to increase infrastructure investment, which in turn boosts the numbers in GDP growth. According to estimates, for China's GDP growth to reach 5.5% in 2022, infrastructure investments need to increase by at least 5.4%, reaching around $2.54 trillion in investments alone. If we also account for drops in exports, this number will need to be even higher to compensate for the lost GDP. When it comes to using infrastructure investments to combat economic crises, we can look back to 2008 when China used $631 billion to finance nationwide large-scale projects, leading to a government debt increase on all levels. In October of 2021, China Data and Tencent jointly released a report showing the debt-to-GDP ratios of various Chinese cities. In it showed that over 85 cities exceeded 100% in 2020, which means their debt was greater than their GDP. Among them, 75 had doubled their debt-to-GDP ratio since 2019, with extremes like Guiyang reaching a ratio of 929%, meaning their debt was almost 10 times greater than their own economic output. On the other hand, the lowest debt was found in Shenzhen, where the ratio barely exceeded 20%. In total, it is not hard to see that China is taking on much more debt than it can pay off. As of 2021, the federal debt reached $3.55 trillion, with an annual increase of 11.4%. In addition, local government debt reached $4.78 trillion, which was an annual increase of 17.9%. In the same year, the central government will have to pay an interest rate of 4.6%, equating to roughly $170 billion, while local governments will have to pay off $220 billion of interest. In other words, the Chinese government will need to pay off $390 billion in debt interest alone, which is over 2.15% of their annual GDP. As such, we can see that the government is heavily indebted. As we have mentioned in a previous video, the city of Hegang of Heilongjiang province went bankrupt last year, making it the first city to require financial restructuring since the CCP was founded in 1949. Seeing all this debt, the investment situation seems to feel unusual. Where is China getting all this money for infrastructure construction? According to analyses on the Chinese industry, the local government generally obtains funding in 2 ways. One way is through financial reallocation, and the other way is through various bonds and loans. As a result, the number of bonds issued by CCP authorities has spiked by a significant amount this year. In January alone, local governments issued a total of $110.25 billion worth of bonds, a 93% increase over the previous January of 2021. Among new bonds issued this year, specialized bonds alone totaled over $230 billion. In terms of debt risks, Ministry of Finance officials claims that the risk will generally be manageable. However, a sizable hidden debt lies on the local level of finance. According to a report published by Goldman Sachs last September, the hidden debt of China's local governments has ballooned to over half the size of China's economy. The total debt of China's local government financing vehicles has grown from $2.52 trillion in 2013 to over $8.36 trillion by the end of 2021. Combined with the total public debt of $8.33 trillion, the true total government debt actually exceeds China's total GDP of $14.7 trillion. Also, due to the sharp decrease in property sales throughout China, many provinces have also lowered their own annual budgets to compensate for the lost revenue. According to Caixin, as of February 9th, 23 of the 25 provinces that have released relevant data have lowered their 2022 revenue targets when comparing with 2021. With this ever-increasing debt paired with the consistently declining revenue, how will local governments ever repay these debts? A few years back, an article in the Chinese media revealed that one of the reasons behind the officials' claims of reassurance was that a portion of the local debts had been passed down onto the public through the disguise of financial products in banks. Initially, the local governments would first register financing platforms under the name of a company to back up a project that they then set up, such as the construction of airports, highways, or tourist attractions. This financing platform will then find banks to finance them, usually highly connected city banks nearby. Of course, these banks know that the chances of them repaying that money is slim, and so they will sell this debt to a trust company with the incentive that the interest will go to them instead. Once again, the trust company is also aware that repayment from the government is unlikely. What they will do instead is that they will package all of this into individualized shares of investments for their customers, which get returned to the bank, allowing them to sell them to receive rebates. As such, many of the customers who fall into this trap are wealthier citizens who put more trust upon the government's reliability and will choose to invest in these financial investments. When the investors do ask for the payment, the parties involved tend to kick the ball around and avoid responsibility. What's worse, because of the affiliations to the government, the chances for a lawsuit succeeding in favor of the investor are extremely slim, seeing as the judicial branch is not independent from the central government. As such, local governments can get away with this and will dare to borrow on such a large scale. If we look at where much of this investment has gone to, some examples include the failed South-North Water Transfer Project with a $77 billion investment, and the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge with an investment of nearly $20 billion, which has strict limitations on who can drive across, meaning very few people actually get any practical use out of it. Now that the Winter Olympics are being held in Beijing, officials are claiming that the maintenance and construction will cost a bit less than $4 billion. However, from the data collected by Business Insider, it would seem that the actual cost is estimated to be closer to $38.5 billion, nearly 10 times the disclosed amount. Due to the financial strain of the Winter Olympics, Chongli District of Zhangjiakou City, one of the 3 major venues hosting the Olympics, is now facing financial difficulties with unpayable debts. According to reports, after Beijing launched bidding for Olympic hosting, Chongli's annual expenditure nearly doubled to $568 million, driven by investments in similar events. This is especially worrisome seeing as in the same year, fiscal revenue only grew by $90 million. To make matters worse, in order to regulate real estate during the pandemic, Beijing authorities have added multiple restrictions on Chongli properties, causing the average value of these properties to drop by over a third during the last 4 years. This has essentially crippled the government's revenue from property sales, falling short of the 2020 financial target by over 22%. In the Fuping County of Shanxi, the former residence of Chinese President Xi Jinping's father was built in 2005. But when Xi Jinping came into power in 2012, the local government began a massive expansion project that demolished entire villages, creating a massive 6,600-acre mausoleum, over one-half the size of Hong Kong. After its completion, it was used as a major tourist attraction. While it is impossible to determine exactly how much money the local government used on the construction project, Jing Junhai, then Minister of Propaganda of Shanxi, was promoted to Secretary of the Jilin Provincial Party for his work on the mausoleum. On the same note, there is also the unusual construction of government offices around China. In 2011, a government office building under construction in the Anhui province was planned to be over 8 White Houses in size, despite their reputation as being a poorer area in China. In 2006, another government office in Hunan opened, occupying over 247 acres of land and costing over $79 million. The office was nicknamed the White House Complex after its resemblance to the U.S. White House. Similarly, the Lanshan Court building in Rizhao City, Shandong, was also likened to the White House when it first opened in 2014. In 2008, yet another government office in Anhui was built at a cost of around $4.7 million. Because of its architectural resemblance to the U.S. Capitol building, it sparked controversy throughout China. Zhejiang province also built an office costing $320 million with overly luxurious decorations, leading many to jokingly call it the #1 county office. Despite being classified as a poor region, Dushan County of Guizhou has been attempting multiple construction projects throughout the past 10 years, heavily indebting themselves. As a consequence of their massive $6.3 billion debt, many of their buildings have had to be halted halfway through construction, leaving behind ghost houses with no one to operate or maintain them. Dushan County's annual revenue totals less than $160 million, and with only 350,000 people, the average citizen carries a debt burden of over $17,000. All of this was just a small example of the list of infrastructure projects brought on throughout all of China. Now that we are seeing even more construction plans, it really raises the question, how many of these projects are just duds that will just waste national resources? Will this really help China's economy in the long run? How many more people will get tricked out of their money under the guise of investment? Only time will tell if any of this turns out well. Officials have also mentioned the creation of other new infrastructures. This new infrastructure will likely focus on the advancement of recent technology, such as 5G stations, data centers, AI, cloud computing, and other facets of technology. We will discuss this issue further in our next video, so make sure to subscribe to our channel to get notified. We have also opened a member website, ChinaObserver.net, where you can find our full scripts for each of our videos. Thank you for your support.